humans, we are all immature. And when tensions rise with our spouse, our immaturity can soar. It's easy to see the immaturity in our spouse and really hard to see it in ourselves. And we can't transform what we can't see. So join me today as I share with you 5 signs you're being immature during conflicts so you can see it in yourself and know what to do about it. I'm Julia Woods, a couples coach and wife of 33 years to my husband, Jeff. I don't know about you, but I have been the ugliest version of myself during fights with my husband. I struggled a lot with being immature, but I didn't recognize it. For many years in our arguments, I turned into the little girl version of myself who was trying to win the war of just wanting to feel lovable. I couldn't see that I wanted something from my husband that wasn't his responsibility. It wasn't his responsibility to change my beliefs and heal my insecurities. But as I tried to make it his responsibility, I treated him very poorly as I immaturely tried to get what I wanted. As I share 5 of the biggest signs of immaturity during conflicts, I'm inviting you and me to see what is uncomfortable to see so we can shift into maturely standing for the marriage and the connection that we long for. At the end, I have a free gift for you that is going to help you start growing maturity in yourself today, so make sure you stay around for that. The first sign we're being immature in a conflict is we're blaming. When something happens and we don't want to admit that we contributed to the outcome, we blame the other person, aka our spouse. We point out everything they did that caused the issues. We focus on their actions, what they're saying or didn't say, or their attitudes, moods, tones, and we tell them their choices caused the problem. This is immaturity because it's out of touch with reality, which means no new results can be produced. Maturity is recognizing that the results of a situation are based on what each person involved contributed. No matter what happened, both of you contributed in some way. We can have a mature conversation only when we're willing to take 100% responsibility for our contributions, even if our contributions are only 5% of what's contributing to the way things are turning out. The second sign we're being immature is that we're making it all about us. At the root of most conflicts, one person is trying to communicate about the impact of their spouse's choices and what that has on them, while the other spouse is defending their intentions. For example, if my husband sat around and we wound up late for my friend's party, I might share my upset about the impact of his choice to sit around, which I'm blaming as to why we are late. He would then be tempted to make it about himself by defending that his intentions weren't to make us late, and there was a good reason he was sitting around. He's trying to convince me that I shouldn't be upset about his impact because he wasn't trying to upset me. That wasn't his intention. The immature version of ourselves wants to validate why we did what we did. It takes maturity to empathize with the other person and take responsibility for the impact of our choices on our spouse, even if our conscious intentions seemed good. It is the willingness to recognize that my choices impact others, and if I can simply acknowledge and take responsibility for my impact, I can develop the character of maturity in myself. The third sign I'm being immature in conflict is being emotionally unavailable. Sharing our emotions, it's vulnerable. And when we are arguing with our spouse, by nature, we want to avoid vulnerability. We work to cover up our emotions and make the part of ourselves unavailable to our spouse. For example, when your spouse asks you what you want or how you feel, you might say, I don't know. Or you focus on the outcome versus what led to the outcome. Like if you're late, you focus on it not being a big deal that you were late versus owning that you were late because you wanted to impress your coworker. Or you feel so many emotions, you lock them away from your spouse by stonewalling. When we argue, our survival system is trying to convince us that our spouse is unsafe and a threat to us. It takes maturity to believe in your love and commitment to each other and choose to be vulnerable. Vulnerability feels like you're exposing yourself to a greater threat, but in reality, maturely expressing our emotions is what creates connections. It takes maturity to choose the momentary discomfort of vulnerability for the long-term gain of trust and respect by being honest with our spouse. The fourth sign we're being immature in conflict is we're being controlling. When our spouse tries to help us see something we aren't ready to look at or don't want to see in ourselves, we will try to convince ourselves that they are attacking us. When we fear attack, we will work to take control of the conversation. Here are some examples of what controlling a conversation shows up like. Exaggerating what we or our spouse said or did, appeasing or just saying what we think they want us to say, raising our voice, gaslighting by trying to convince them that they are crazy for what they think or feel, or trying to be right or convince our spouse that our way is the right way or the approach to the situation. All of these are examples of how we try and control in conflicts. If we can control the conversation, we can create a diversion and avoid seeing what we don't want to see in ourselves. Seeing our spouse's upset as feedback, it takes a lot of maturity. Maturity is finding the gold in someone's feedback, no matter how poorly it's being delivered. And when we notice ourselves trying to control the conversation, we can simply own it and go again. The fifth and final sign that we are being controlling in conflicts is we're being vague. When a conflict with our spouse, it is easy to see our spouse as untrustworthy or doubt that they have our best intentions at heart. Subconsciously, we want to find all the reasons we can't or shouldn't trust them. The moment we decide they aren't trustworthy, we start acting untrustworthy ourselves. One of the ways we act untrustworthy is by being vague. Some examples of what that looks like is when our spouse is trying to confront something. We say things like, we can talk about that later, but we don't get specific about when later is. Or we use labels like, I'm upset about how you're acting, but we don't specify what part of how they're acting is really bothering us. Or when they ask us to do something we don't really want to do, we say, sure, I'll do that. But we don't say when or what we're actually going to do. So we can put it off and hopefully never need to actually do it. The other person knows they can't trust us because they sense the vagueness. It develops our maturity and invites our spouse into maturity with us when we can honestly say what is there for us. It takes maturity to express that I don't want to do what you're asking me to do, but I will choose to do it anyway, and here is when I will complete it. Growing the character of maturity, it's not easy. It's hero-making work. It requires personal responsibility, empathy, vulnerability, and surrendering to what is uncomfortable and being specific. And while those things are not easy, I can say that the gift of being able to show up maturely in difficult conversations is life-changing. The more I choose to do, the more meaningful, life-giving, and connected my marriage becomes as I choose to step into the uncomfortable work of choosing maturity. If you want to develop maturity in yourself, I have a free gift for you to help you take the next step. In the description under this video, you will find a link to my ebook called Turn Defensiveness into Connection. In it, I share a personal story about how I shifted from extreme immaturity in my husband and I's conversations about finances and how choosing maturity transformed years of defensive battles. I hope that you will enjoy that and it will help you produce maturity for yourself. Thank you for joining me today. If you found this episode valuable, would you give it a thumbs up and share in the comments just one thing you discovered through it? And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Hey, hon.
Yeah.
Of the 5 forms of immaturity, whether it's being controlling, making it about me, being emotionally unavailable, being vague, or trying to control, which of those forms of immaturity was the most painful for you in our conflict? Or is? Because I still can be all those.
I would say the controlling. And vague, because then I was forced to read your mind.